two topics, just like the last few lectures. I'm going to cover language, specifically language development. I'm focusing on how we acquire or develop language, focusing a bit more on childhood than adults. And then I'm going to touch on less on intelligence, okay? So more on language and a bit less on intelligence. And hopefully I'll have time to let you read a few research articles, probably one or two today. But I've printed more which relates to the next topic, emotions, emotional development later on. Before I teach you how is it we acquire different aspects of language, you need to know what the components of language are. Okay? These are the four basic components of language. The first being phonemes, or basic sound units, semantics, which make up your vocabulary, the meaning of words and sentences, grammar, that is the structure of language, or syntax, or the use of morphemes, and the pragmatics of language. Okay, the social use of language. How do you use language to communicate with others? How is it that you communicate with others? Okay, and these can be based on, for example, conversational rules. There are certain rules when I talk to you that you don't talk at the same time as I do. Okay, so these are simple social uses and applications of language. Well, how do we acquire language? And there are several theories, several approaches, or several perspectives on this. The first being the learning view, okay? Learning based on what I taught you when I taught you Skinner. And it's the idea that language acquisition depends on reinforcement and imitation, okay, social learning. But how do children develop language in a particular sequence cannot be explained by the learning view. Okay? If we assume that children learn a language by simply copying what adults say, or using a word, using a sentence after reinforcement, then it doesn't really explain why is it children develop language from the use of phonemes and then gradually building up on these very basic components of language. Okay? So it just tells us how is it they acquire bigger units of sounds, but not how they develop. And it also doesn't explain why, in some circumstances, children acquire certain components of language even without reinforcement. Okay, sometimes children learn words even though you don't reinforce them, you don't give them a reward, you don't praise them, but somehow they learn that word or sentence. Okay, and some children, or in some cases, children learn words without imitation. They just simply learn words on their own, not necessarily copying what others are saying or what others are using. In contrast, the nativist view, coming from the very well-known Noam Chomsky's LAD, language acquisition device. And what Chomsky claims is that all of us are born with the LAD. Okay, all of us are born with the ability to acquire language. It's innate. It's biologically based. And there's evidence. Why? Why is it that all of us, all across the world, in so many different cultures, we share certain universal features in all languages? Okay? And also another evidence, and which I'll focus on a bit more, is that there seems to be a critical period in language acquisition. Okay, there are some cases where it's clear that if you don't acquire language by a certain age, you simply lose the ability to acquire language normally. Okay, your language will always be impaired if you don't acquire it at a certain time. Okay, so there seems to be a biological basis, some innate basis to this. Okay, so there seems to be evidence for the LAD. But there's also evidence to show that social context or culture is important. Okay? There seems to be more differences between languages than similarities. Yes, there are universal features across how we use language or the components of language, but why is it there's still so many differences? Okay, what is the meaning of that? The LAD does not explain that. The third common view about language acquisition is the interactionist view. Okay? And this is probably the most ideal because it combines both the learning view and the nativist view. Okay? So the idea is that yes, we have all of us have this innate ability to acquire language, but we need a supportive context. We need a context that supports our use of language. If you teach me a language and then you dump me in the middle of nowhere with no other person in sight, and I have to live there for several years without the opportunity to use language with another human being, then I may eventually lose what I learned, or I may simply not be able to acquire the whole language normally. Okay? So the idea is that the biologically programmed ability, the LAD that we have, must be complemented with extensive experience with language. It's not enough that we are born with the ability to use language. Okay? We have to be able to live in a context where we can use it. All right? Any one of you seen, I forgot the name of the film. The film with Tom Hanks. He was stranded alone on an island. What was it called? The whole film was about him being alone on that island. Castaway. Yes. So go and watch that if you're interested in what are the profound impacts, okay, of not having a context like that to support you. Now, lack of stimulation, one of the earliest, or the interest comes from one of the earliest evidence of the story of Jeannie. How many of you have heard of Jeannie? Some of you probably have heard of her. Now, Jeannie was a case of severe maltreatment, severe maltreatment. She was abused and locked up in a cage. She had to almost live in a cage most of her life, up to the age of 13 when she was discovered. She was never spoken to since birth. Okay, so her father prevented anyone from saying a single word to her. She knew probably only about less than 10 words. Okay, potty, very, very basic words that she heard only momentarily. So she lived in a very deprived context. She was not spoken to. And when she was discovered at age 13, it was by chance. I think she was very sick or something, and her mother decided to run away with her. They ended up in a hospital, and they didn't realize that she was 13 because she did not appear to be. And she was given intensive rehab. This was a huge case in the US. Okay? Both academics, a professor gave her rehab, a professor who was interested. Actually, a professor and his PhD student basically took care of her and tried to teach her language. And then she lived in a place where there were nurses taking care of her. So she was given full rehabilitation. And throughout this language teaching, she was able to use speech much like that of a young child. She could not use speech just like any 13-year-old. Okay? She used sentences like "another house have dog." And no matter how hard the academics or the nurses or the trainers tried to teach her language, tried to make her reach her potential for normal for her age, she was never able to. Another case would be deafness. Okay? Deaf children obviously learn language differently because the language for deaf people does not depend on the auditory vocal channel. Okay? So deaf people have to resort to using a different form of language. Okay? And the American Sign Language involves a system of gestures, just like many other sign language systems. And ASL, what it does is rather than using words that we produce verbally through our mouths, vocally, the ASL has hand shapes and positions, okay, for each word composition. And what's fascinating is babies born to ASL users, deaf ASL, so even though these babies are normal, okay, they are not deaf, but the babies born to deaf ASL users can learn from their caregivers through informal interaction. Okay, so they are able to use sign language even though they don't need to, or they simply don't need to because they are not deaf. Another case would be blindness. Now, blind children learn language just as quickly and as well as sighted children. Okay, they just learn language differently. And vision-related words, well, you would wonder, how do they learn words like look and see when they cannot look and see? They usually use their hands rather than their eyes. Okay, so look would be, I think, something like look, using their hands as their eyes instead. Now, what's interesting is when we are thinking about how blind children learn color words, it looks like blind children can learn color words even without personally experiencing them. They cannot see the colors, but they basically learn words like red, blue, yellow by associating them with things they are familiar with. Okay, so banana will always, well, usually be yellow, and they will associate with the word yellow with banana, even though they have no idea what yellow looks like. The final type of context or challenge that tells us how languages are learned, or language is learned differently, is language impairments. And I touched on this briefly when I taught you brain and the nervous system. Okay? People who have aphasia, that is a disorder of language produced by lesions in certain areas of the cortex in the left hemisphere, have difficulty with language. And this is caused by either a lesion in Broca's area in the brain that leads to non-fluent aphasia, that is speech difficulty. Okay, they have difficulty producing words, producing sentences, producing grammar, producing speech. A lesion in Wernicke's area, on the other hand, produces fluent aphasia. Okay, that is a problem with comprehension. This person is able to produce speech, but have difficulty understanding what people are saying to them. Okay? And then finally, SLI, specific language impairment. Now, this is a very challenging disorder because it's still poorly understood. We still don't know why people don't seem to have aphasia, but yet they still have difficulty learning language. Okay? It's a syndrome in which people are very, very slow in learning a language. And it does not seem to be caused by developmental disorders or brain damage. Okay? And throughout life, people with SLI have difficulty in understanding and producing many sentences, even though their intelligence seems normal. Now, second language learning tells us that we learn the second language differently from how we learn the first language. Okay, quite naturally. And the knowledge of the first or native language is much, much better than the knowledge of a second or third language, okay, in usual cases. And the evidence shows that the brain loci, the part of the brain, the area of the brain, of late learned languages, that is languages learned after the first one, usually are different, okay? Where your second or third language is stored is different from where your first language is stored. And the older you are in learning a second language, then the more difficult it is to become fluent in that language. Many of you might already be experiencing that if you're trying to learn a new language in university, as opposed to if you learn a language when you were in primary school. Okay? So what is it that these different language, these differences in language learning tell us? Most importantly is the critical or sensitive period hypothesis. Okay, all of us want to know when is it that children have to acquire language for them to acquire it normally, completely. And there's definitely evidence, as from all the evidence that I've showed you, that language is most easily acquired in early childhood. Okay, that is before puberty. And there's evidence for sensitive periods for language acquisition coming from, for example, the case of Jeannie, or there are several other cases where some children have not been able to acquire language because they were taught to use language much later than they should be. Okay, and evidence for critical period also comes from second language learning, when you're learning a second language much later than the first language, well past your critical period. Okay. So let me touch now on the few aspects of language development. How is it babies acquire language? From the moment they're born, what is it that they're exposed to that helps them become able to produce language and comprehend language? Okay, it all begins with infant-directed speech. Okay, when you might have already seen how parents talk to their babies. I do not want to demonstrate here because it's embarrassing. But I am going to show you a quick video of a classic example of infant-directed speech. So you can see that as parents and infants engage in a dialogue of sounds, okay, sometimes parents break the words, I, and then say love, or breaking each word into specific sounds, or using gestures, facial expressions. Okay, it's likely that when his mother was teaching the statement, I love you, she was smiling, making direct eye contact with the baby. And the baby feels reinforced that I really do want to say the same thing as my mommy. Okay? So during this process, already in the first year of life, and moving to the second year of life, the infant grows as a communicative partner. The next fascinating stage is gesturing. Okay? And Golden Meadows put it quite perfectly that gesturing sets the stage for language development. Okay? It basically provides the foundation, the basis for how children acquire language. At 6 months, most babies learn to use pointing gestures. Okay? Sometimes their pointing might not be very clear. It might be like this. Or they don't seem to be pointing at something specifically, but they are using some form of gesture to communicate what they want. Okay? And it could be a proto-declarative gesture. Okay? A gesture intended to make a statement about an object. Can you give me an example? One classic one is when babies want to go to the toilet. They grab their private part, don't they? They grab their nappy. Okay, maybe you haven't seen babies then. I will tell you that this is what they do. Okay? Parents will know, you want to pee-pee, don't you? Or you want to poo-poo, don't you? Because if the baby is grabbing the nappy like this. Or, walking around very, very awkwardly. So there are gestures for babies because they need to communicate what they need. And they do not want to, in many cases, parents misunderstand babies. They think the babies want to poo in their nappies. They don't. Okay, for sometimes they just can't help it, or they're trying to get the attention of adults, but no one's paying attention to them. The other type of gesture would be a proto-imperative gesture. These are gestures intended to get another person to do something for the child. Examples. Yeah.
Raising their hands to be lifted.
Raising their hands to be lifted, yes. Anyway, by the end of the first year, infants start to use gestures to communicate and share their intentions with another. Okay, they start using this symbolic interaction, and gradually they start putting sounds and words together. So it's beyond gesturing that children acquire receptive language. I will define what these are: receptive language and expressive or productive language. In terms of receptive language, it means early speech perception, speech perception. That is understanding speech, understanding language. Now, as early as 1 month of age, infants can perform categorical speech perception. That is, they are able to discriminate speech sounds, for example, consonants, okay, t and d, m and n, these different kinds of sounds. Now, it of course depends on what kind of language they're exposed to that helps them distinguish between different sounds. Exposure to specific or native languages determines their ability to distinguish and categorize specific sounds or phonemes. Okay? In some languages, you don't use certain consonants at all compared with other languages. And there is evidence, for example, from a study on 4-day-old babies in France and America that show that these babies can discriminate between English and French speech. And by 2 months, these babies listen longer when their own native language is spoken. They pay attention more to their own languages than other languages. Oh, this meant to show the baby listening longer, not looking shocked. Okay? So he wasn't really in shock, I hope. So as babies babies develop from birth onwards, okay, through infant-directed speech right at the beginning. When mothers use infant-directed speech, they don't just use any language. They use the native language or the language they would like their child to use. Some mothers use 2 different languages in infant-directed speech, okay, because they want to expose their babies to 2 languages from the beginning. But eventually, infants lose the ability to make phoneme distinctions that are not useful to them. Okay, they only learn the ability to distinguish between sounds that are useful in their native language, because that's the language that's being used in their context. Okay, that is the language that their parents, their families are using. For example, Japanese infants, because they don't need to distinguish between la and ra in their language, they eventually stop distinguishing between these 2 sounds, as opposed to English-speaking children. Okay? So babies begin to listen specifically, and I touched on this before when I taught you brain plasticity, for the particulars of their own language. They start tuning in to their own language. On the other hand, for early speech production, that is productive language, or otherwise known as expressive language, the production of sounds in the first year of life follows an orderly 4-stage sequence. So this has been the sequence that has been established in research, how babies acquire or produce speech eventually. And I'll show you a very cool study in a bit by an MIT professor, where he basically planned an experiment to begin from the moment his son was born. And he had video cameras all over his house until his son was 2 years old. So every single minute of his son's life was captured on camera. And he wanted to see if there's this progression of how his child acquire his first word. So it basically starts from crying, then cooing. We saw a lot of Eddie's cooing, babbling. Okay, babbling you see more at 2 years. And then pattern speech. Start piecing different words together, making sentences, etc. Now, there are cultural differences in pre-speech sounds emerging around the babbling stage. When children are at the babbling stage, you can already tell that they're distinguishing between their native language and perhaps a language they're learning elsewhere, like in kindergarten or daycare. So again, babies start to tune into the specific sounds of their native language, producing what would be typical in their native language. Well, how do children acquire words? And there are different views on how children make an association, okay, or determine a relationship between a word and an object. Car and an actual car. The first view being that associations are combined with attention to perceptual similarity. Okay? Children simply try to remember what this object looks like. Okay? A car usually has 4 wheels and some windows and maybe a steering wheel. Okay? So they try to remember the perceptual similarity or the perceptual aspects of the object and linking it, try to remember it as an association with a word that they're trying to learn. The second view is social cues. Okay, for example, what Eddie, that was very young then, but children like Eddie would be reinforced using social cues from adults to learn a particular word. Okay, when the child is trying to produce a word similar to what the adult is saying, and the adult provides positive reinforcement, saying, yes, that's right. Okay, that's a social cue, that's a social reinforcement as well. The child is able to continue making the association, reinforcing that association. The third view is that children use multiple cues depending on their age. Okay, when they're young, they do learn words based on perceptual information. But as they grow older, as they interact more and more with adults, because they are able to, then they start focusing or start depending on social cues to learn language. How about grammar? Well, by 2 years of age, and we will see in a bit in the study that I'm showing you, children begin to use 2-word utterances. Okay? And this is also known as telegraphic speech. Why is it telegraphic? Because children say something that assumes the other person will know what they mean. Okay? So, for example, their book, rather than saying the book is there. Okay? A 2-year-old would just use 2-word utterances. More milk, their book. Any other examples from students who have no contact with babies? Guess. Their book, more milk. Me hug. Me kiss. Daddy kiss. Mommy kiss.
Door open.
Door open, yeah? Yeah. Just any 2 words that are not random, that are not nonsensical. Okay, they mean something, and we as adults can usually guess what they want. Okay? And telegraphic speech includes crucial words needed to convey. Okay? They're not just random words. Children are able to pick on what they know would convey what they want. And from 2 years onwards, this develops from this telegraphic speech, these 2-word utterances, to more complex sentences, more complex statements. Children learn the rules of grammar, okay, understanding and acquiring morphemes, like adding s to things that are plural, or using tenses, using ing to certain verbs. And in the 3rd year of life, children go through a stage of grammatical flowering. Okay? Their grammar blossoms in the 3rd year of life, where their sentence construction improves. They use increasing types of verbs and tenses. They're able to pose questions, and this might be the age when children drive parents crazy, because they will always ask why to everything. Okay? You have to go to bed now, why? Eat your food, why? We're going out now, why? So this is a time when they really, really pose questions. Okay? And children use language as they develop as a social tool through speech acts. They stop using words just to label objects. They start using speech to convey meaning, to refer to situations, to refer to intent, rather than to one object or action. They also use language as a social tool through discourse, conversations, okay? Socially based conversations where they listen and respond to another speech. And children also have to learn the rules of pragmatics. Okay? You don't just use language randomly. You use language appropriate to a given situation. So for example, you need to engage the attention of a listener. You don't talk to someone if it's quite clear that person's not paying attention to you. I don't just talk to someone I know outside the building. I don't just talk to someone who cannot see me, who does not know that I'm talking to him or her. Another rule of pragmatics is you have to be sensitive to the listener's feedback and respond clearly. Okay? If you're talking and the person does not understand you, you can usually tell, and you're sensitive to their facial expression, for example. If they look confused, you get the idea that you need to repeat yourself to make it, or to say it in a different way. Okay? And you may have to adjust speech to the characteristics of the listener. What do I mean when I say you have to adjust your speech to, for example, the age of the listener? Anyone tell me? Yes?
Well, if the listener is older, you may need to speak slower or louder.
Oh, so a senior person, you may need to speak slower or louder. How else? Yes?
When I talk to my au pair child, of course I had to use language which is fitting for a child.
Right? You have to simplify.
And for him, he could adjust his language to me or his mom. So for him, me, like Lara was always German, his mom was always Chinese. So when he was with both of us, he would like exchange those languages so quickly, it was amazing. But when I was talking in Chinese, because his friends from kindergarten were around, then for him it was confusing to see me talking Chinese, because for him Lara was German, and yeah, so it was confused.
Right. He can be bilingual, but he's confused why you're bilingual.
Yeah.
Right. How about adjusting speech to the culture of the person? What does that mean? So, for example, when I first, I don't know why I'm the one giving all the examples, but when I first arrived in Taiwan last year, I lived with my mother-in-law and father-in-law, alone, by the way. My husband was still in the US. So I spent 5 months living with them. And they eventually adjusted their speech because my Chinese was pretty bad at the time. Okay, it's pretty bad now too. But they started adjusting, simplifying their Chinese when they talk to me. Now, they can't speak English, so I could only use Chinese with them, or Taiyu, which I really didn't know how to use. But I could understand most of it. So they started simplifying their sentences or using words that were easier for me to understand. And not using proverbs like 成语, these kinds of things. Even though I used to learn it in school, but that was a long time ago. And then they also adjusted their speech by using English words when they could. When I was really confused and they were really confused, then they tried to produce an English word that I would understand. Now we're okay. Now we can speak mostly almost entirely in Chinese. So that is a classic example. Okay? They know very well I come from a different culture, a different background, and they adjusted their speech accordingly. Or else it will be the war between the daughter-in-law and the parents-in-law. Surely when you are talking, when local students are meeting international students for the first time, there are many international students, I'm sure some of you, who actively want to speak Chinese as often as you can. And your friends might unconsciously adjust their speech to help you learn it faster, for example. Okay? Or your professors might talk to you in a slightly different way, depending on your culture. Okay? Either they speak more slowly, or they use simpler language, etc. I hope I haven't used different levels of English with all of you. I think I've used the same regardless of what your background is, just so you will learn more quickly. Adjusting speech to the social background. This is a tricky one, also probably a sensitive one. The other adjustment would be adjusting speech to suit a situation. Okay? We all learn that how we talk depends on the context we're in. You certainly don't talk loudly when you're in church, or you're at a funeral, or at any occasion where you're just simply required or expected to, rather than required, expected to, according to the norm, to speak more quietly, to whisper. What other situations do you think you have to adjust your speech in? Yeah.
For example, if you're in an interview for a job interview, for example, you don't speak the same way as if you're speaking with your friends.
Right. Speaking in a job interview would be very different from how you speak with your friends. Or for some of you, speaking to a professor seems to be different than when you speak with your friends.
Or when you're doing a presentation.
Yeah. When you're doing presentation. How about when you don't have to do anything? It's just the fact that you're in a different situation. What kind of situations? Other than church. Interview. Presentation. Yeah.
At home or at school.
Sorry?
If I speak at home, I will maybe speak louder or
You might speak louder at home, but not at school. Why?
because I feel really relaxed at home.
Okay, because you feel more relaxed at home. Any other examples? That you consciously adjust your speech because of a particular situation. Yes?
When someone is sleeping, it's like in the same room or...
Okay. When someone else clearly needs the quiet environment. Anyone else? Okay. Learning to listen as well. That when someone has just said something, you don't just ignore them. Well, unless you want to. But you generally don't ignore what another person has said to you. You learn to listen to them and then respond accordingly. And finally, evaluating one's own and the conversational partner's messages. Okay, when I say something, I do think about what I'm saying, okay? Whether it means something to this person. And likewise, that person, what that person is saying to me, do I understand it? Do I know what he's trying to tell me or what she's trying to tell me? And how should I respond to that? Okay, so it's an ongoing evaluation or introspection. So by 2 years of age, children already learn to address listeners during interaction. Okay, when they are playing, when a child is playing with another child, either playing a toy or something, they might get the attention of the other so that they want to talk to them. They direct communication to others when they can see each other. Okay, they don't usually do it when they can't see each other. They learn to make close contact to the topic or object of conversation. If they want to talk about a toy, they would go to the toy and then maybe go da 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 at the toy. But they would try to make close contact to make sure that the listener is paying attention to what they want to talk about. And finally, even at 2 years of age, they show responsiveness to feedback. Okay, perhaps when the other twin laughed at what that twin was saying, that twin feels reinforced. Oh, he likes this. I'm going to talk more about this, whatever they were talking about. And 2 to 3-year-olds also start learning to adjust speech. They start to use more repetitions when talking to a baby sibling. Okay, I don't have an example, but they do adjust their speech according to age of the listener, even at that age. They repeat when they know the child or the baby is not responding. They use more attention-eliciting words. Look, look, look. They might only have to use the word look once with their mom, but many times with their baby sibling, or other words like hello. Of course, there are limitations when children are learning the rules of pragmatics, learning the social use of language. They are less effective speakers when they have to compete with other adults or children in the room, okay, for example. They are less competent when they are speaking about absent objects, okay, when they're talking about things that are not in the room, abstract things like feelings. When they have to talk about their thoughts, they are less competent. Okay, they're able to talk about objects, actions, etc. more easily. And certainly, they're also less competent when talking about relationships. They also learn to listen, and even 3-year-olds are able to recognize ambiguous messages and respond appropriately. And this was nicely demonstrated in Ravel's study, where they said ambiguous requests to 3- and 4-year-olds, like bring me the refrigerator. Okay, it's ambiguous because we know very well the child will think of it as an ambiguous message. Many would understand that the request is problematic. Okay, to a 3- or 4-year-old, bring me the refrigerator is impossible. And many of these children requested more information when they were asked, bring me the refrigerator. How? It's too heavy, etc. Okay? Now, and the final part of language development that I'm going to just touch on very quickly is something that's very much prevalent in our society today. More and more people are bilingual or multilingual with all this, especially even among university students who do exchange overseas, etc., or who actively want to learn a second language in university. How many of you are learning new language at NTU? Oh, I haven't finished my question, but okay. Now, how many of you are learning it without knowing whether you will need it or not? Okay, let me rephrase. How many of you are learning it because you need to learn it? You're learning it because you need to learn it. How many? Okay. Well, why are you learning it? Oh, look, I'm not questioning you. Just be honest. Why? Don't worry, I'll cut it from the camera, from the video. So why are you learning this second language? Or third language or whatever, number, whatever? You don't know why you're learning?
I guess it just feels like fun and like something else to do.
Fun and something else to do, okay?
Because I want to watch Korean videos without like subtitles, waiting for the subtitles.
You want to be able to understand Korean videos without waiting for the subtitles. Okay, completely valid reason, yeah?
I think it's more like survival skill. You never know when you will need it. Why you come in handy?
You never know when you need it, but you'll come in handy. What languages are you learning?
I'm answering for them, the general.
Yeah, so I'm asking them. What languages are you learning? Okay, Chinese? Japanese? Surely no one is learning Malay. Well, why these languages? Why? Okay, Korean I can understand. Japanese?
Because some of my grandparents, they can speak Japanese, and I think it's really, I want to have conversation with them in Japanese.
Your grandparents don't speak Taiwanese?
Yes, they do, but I think it's...
You want to be able to talk to them in Japanese? Okay. Other reasons? Just because it's fun?
Also because my little brother, he's in a German school, so he speaks German, so...
Are you competing with him?
No. That's why I feel like nice to be able to have something else to talk about.
Okay, okay. And yeah.
My boyfriend's from Guatemala, so I want to speak his mother tongue too.
So okay, perfectly valid reason. I unfortunately did not do that. I did not try to improve my Chinese, but just because my husband is Taiwanese. But that's because we met in England and we spoke English right from the beginning. So we only talk in English to each other anyway. So that's when the other person, but, well, okay. Any other reasons? Should bilingualism be compulsory in education? Let's think of this in a policy perspective. Should it be compulsory that you learn? In Taiwan, do you learn another language in primary school? You do, right? You learn English, at least. Okay? In kindergarten, many now learn English at least as well. High school? Okay. And do you think it should be compulsory? You have to have an opinion, because when you eventually have children, you will worry about their education if you want to have children. Or it has very long-term implications. Like, for example, you were taught English in school. Do you think it's useful to you? Well, obviously now it's useful to you, or else you wouldn't understand a word I'm saying. How about in other countries? Is bilingualism or teaching two languages compulsory in every school of every student here? Yeah.
Yes. In Sweden, it's compulsory to learn English from your, I think, 9, and then you start the third language when you're 12, and it's and you have to learn 3 languages for 4 years. So most children in Sweden.
So what's the third language?
Spanish, Italian, French.
So you choose. You just have to learn another one.
Yes, and if you have great difficulties with English, you can choose to continue with the English instead and have extra hours.
Okay.
And you can also learn to speak sign language if you want. If you don't have that language.
Okay.
You have to, since compulsory.
Yeah.
In Costa Rica, it's similar. You have to learn English and we do Spanish English, and then in high school we do French as well for 3 years.
Okay.
I guess it is.
Yeah. Well, maybe in some countries where it's natural to learn several languages at the same time, it does not necessarily have to be part of formal education. Now, the reason why I ask that is, well, if it's useful, if it has positive implications on development, and it doesn't prevent the child from learning other things, because the second language will take up part of the courses, part of the education course. Now, should we replace that with a more useful subject? Is a question. Okay, and so this is something that is always being debated. But let us think about the few consequences of bilingualism that will tell us whether it will help, whether it will not, why might it be useful, etc. Now, one of the consequences of bilingualism is that the learning of each language will be slower. So if I have two 5-year-olds, I have one learning only English, one learning English and Chinese. The one learning English and Chinese will be poorer in Chinese than the other child at the same time, simply because she's handling two languages. Okay? And the vocabularies of each language will be smaller as well than a child learning just one language. However, a child learning several languages, or two languages at least, can use the distinct sounds from each language to deal with the cognitive load from learning two languages. So yes, cognitively, it might be more challenging. It might be heavier for the child to learn two languages. But if the two languages are similar and they share same sounds, it might actually help the child learn the two languages because they reinforce each other. Okay, there are certain languages that belong to the same group. But on the other hand, if the child is learning two languages that are completely different, it will also help the child distinguish sounds much more easily. Okay, so it works both ways. And the skillfulness, if the child is able to master these two languages, it actually leads to better concept formation and more flexible thinking, just because the child is used to handling two different things at once. And bilingual exposure in early infancy, or otherwise known as crib bilingualism, enhances the ability to monitor and switch between competing tasks. And this is the case because children have to learn to inhibit knowledge about one language while learning another language. And this promotes executive control. Okay? When a child is using one language, he or she needs to learn how to prevent him or herself from using the sounds of the other language. And it's through this training that the child is able to switch, is able to control thoughts and actions more easily, and also show better cognitive flexibility. Okay? So this leads to the child to be better able to monitor, repair, and reinterpret sentences. So the take-home message is, it's good for you to take a class in English, okay, not just Chinese. Yes?
We had a family friend like a long time ago, and there was this boy. He wouldn't speak at the age of 6 because his parents were bilingual, and then he couldn't. He had speech problems, and then
Yeah. So we wouldn't say he couldn't speak at the age of 6 because his parents are bilingual.
No, but he could. He can speak, but he wouldn't and he often is confused with like the two languages. So then they started speaking to him only in English, and he was speaking to him.
I think my question for that would be, there must be other reasons why he is refusing to use the two languages. Maybe there is a negative experience associated with one of the languages. I don't know. But we will have to understand this child's context much more in depth to be able to understand why he refuses to talk when he knows how to. Yeah. Okay. I'm going to zip through. In-class reading. Let's spend some time. Yes, I have time. I'm just going to ask you to read the first page. It's very short, don't worry. I expect you to take no more than 5 minutes to read this. The rest, I want you to keep hold of this and bring this again to class after the exam, because I'm teaching you emotional development, and there are articles about emotion in here, okay? All right. I want to continue just so I want to make sure that I'm covering intelligence. I finished covering intelligence. Are you ready to move on? Okay. All right. Are you ready to move on? All right. Intelligence is a tricky one for me. Intelligence is a tricky one for me because I'm not convinced there's a single good theory on intelligence. I myself think intelligence is everything. It really cannot be categorized so easily. But let's go through what we know. Let's go through what is common knowledge to us and what has been proposed by researchers, etc. Well, let me first ask you, what is it? Give me any words that come into your mind. Give me any words that come into your mind, any sentences that come into your mind when I ask you what is intelligence. Don't think too hard. Don't think too hard. You shouldn't have to think too hard. You shouldn't have to think too hard. What is intelligence? What is intelligence? Writing? Writing? Ability to learn? Ability to learn? I find that students seem to respond better when I'm writing. Okay, here we go. Okay, here we go. What else? IQN. What is EQ? EQ. What is EQ? Emotional quotient. Emotional quotient. What else? What else? What does it mean to be intelligent? What does it mean to be intelligent? Okay. Ability to comprehend. What else? Yeah. Yeah.
To understand something. Ability to understand.
Similar, I would say. Problem solving. I'm gonna forget about writing ability. Just problem solving. Really? That's it? That's all you need to be intelligent? Or that's the only thing what it means to be intelligent? How about people who are illiterate? Yeah.
Ability to make his own opinion.
Ability to what?
To have his own opinion.
Having an opinion. Having an opinion. Yep. Expressiveness. What kind of expressiveness? You're talking about verbal. How about people who cannot speak? No, I'm kidding. You can use sign language, right? What else? Yeah. Creativity. Anything else? Let's think about the people who sell food in Taiwan. People who have the food stalls. Okay, someone saying chou tofu. This guy could be supremely intelligent. What would make him appear intelligent? Okay, problem solving. When he can't sell his chou tofu, finish selling chou tofu, he has to come up. He has to solve that problem. How fast is he able to solve that problem? Speed. A very common measure. What else? We can't say he's less intelligent than us. Well, that's what I think anyway. What else does he need? Yeah.
In some ways, to see when there is a problem.
To see the problem. Okay. Awareness. He needs to be creative. For some cases, if he needs to advertise. What else? Flexibility. What do you mean? So, for example, this guy saying chou tofu. What? It's okay. I'm sure I can understand you. It's just it's not loud enough. Some kind of creativity. No, I mean when you say flexibility, why would this total guy have to be flexible? Different problems, being able to solve different problems. Anything else? Okay. This is what Albert Einstein said. It's not that I'm so smart, it's just that I stay with problems longer. Persistence seems to be what he's implying. And I really like this quote. Rather than implying that anyone can be a genius, well, actually, it is implying anyone can be a genius if you stay with problems longer. Let's think about it first in terms of what types of intelligence there are. Then we can break them down slowly and categorize people according to these different kinds of intelligence. Fluid intelligence refers to the ability to deal with new problems and unusual problems. Okay, this requires kind of in-the-moment decisions. And people with high fluid intelligence are likely to be a fast learner. Okay? But fluid intelligence decreases with age because your other physical abilities, your brain, also decreases in terms of how effective it is. And also, fluid intelligence is more susceptible to bodily changes. Okay? Whether or not you can solve a problem-solving task depends on whether you're on drugs, whether you're under the influence of alcohol, whether you're very stressed, whether you're very happy, whether you're very hot or cold. Okay, so fluid intelligence is more easily influenced by bodily changes than crystallized intelligence. Now you can understand why crystallized intelligence is called crystallized. Because it's knowledge that is already acquired, okay, what we already know, what we already have. And crystallized intelligence is useful for dealing with problems that are similar to those already encountered. Basically, as you encounter similar tasks, it goes back to what you already know about how to solve this task. Okay? I become better at putting a jigsaw puzzle together based on my experiences building more and more jigsaw puzzles, going for 100 pieces to 1,000 pieces to 2,000 pieces, etc. Or being able to put together jigsaw puzzles of different scenes. Like I've always practiced, maybe putting seaside landscapes. So I'm very good at putting sea jigsaw puzzles together, etc. And this is very much influenced by experience. Okay? How many times you've encountered something similar. And crystallized intelligence increases with age, okay? Which goes in hand with an increase in experience. One of the theories of intelligence is Sternberg's triadic theory of intelligence. And there are three major components. The first one being, to be highly intelligent, you need to have very good information processing skills. Okay, the ability to encode, store, being able to remember what you learned, and retrieving that information. When I'm giving you a task that requires you to show some kind of creativity, are you able to do that? Experience with a given task is also part of this theory, that for you to be intelligent, you need to be exposed to a particular intelligence task or practice with it. Finally, the ability to adapt, okay, showing flexibility. When I'm giving you a similar task with one different component, are you able to change your strategy to solve this problem with this different component? Okay, so adapting to requirements, that is, solving the task, selecting the situation to meet the abilities and needs. Okay, when you know you're not good enough at something, perhaps you are able to select the situation to meet your level of ability and your needs. Now, Sternberg came up with several theories because he was still fine-tuning what it meant to be intelligent. So the first one was triadic. The second one is Sternberg's theory of successful intelligence. That is the ability, he was trying to take into account the society level, okay, a broader macro context. That means the ability to meet your own goals and the goals of his or her society. And three abilities are required, okay, for the successful intelligence. You have to be analytical. Don't think we have analytical here. Being able to reason about the best answer to a question, weighing the pros and cons about something. Being creative, devising, coming up with new methods to address an issue, to solve a problem. This doesn't work. I need to come up with a different one. Being practical, okay, having the skills used in work, family life, or social or professional interactions. It's not just being book smart, but sometimes being street smart, or being smart in terms of if your family is in the business, that you acquire business skills and you master them, okay? Then finally, Gardner's theory of multiple intelligence, and he comes up with 8 kinds of intelligence depending on the kind of person you are and the kind of profession that you might go for. Linguistic intelligence would be characteristic of people who are poets or teachers. Logical mathematical intelligence, okay, quite common in scientists. Spatial intelligence would characterize engineers, artists, architects. Musical intelligence, bodily kinesthetic intelligence, characteristic of dancers, athletes, sports people. Intrapersonal, okay, characteristic of novelists, actors. Interpersonal, psychotherapists. They need to know how to interact, how to understand another person, being able to possibly read other people's minds. Naturalistic intelligence, characteristic of biologists. So the 8 kinds of intelligence here. Do you think there is any type of intelligence that is not in there? Does this cover all types? Do you see yourself as belonging to any one of these categories? If not, why? I certainly would be questioning whether I have linguistic intelligence alone.
Or social.
Social intelligence, well, that would be interpersonal. Number 7. So apart from psychotherapists, PR managers, okay, would have very good interpersonal intelligence. What else? Can you think of anything that is not in there, that this theory has somehow missed? Yep. What?
Teach.
Ability to teach. He calls it linguistic, so what would you call it? What would you call it?
A chef.
Chef. Where would a chef go? Someone who's very good at cooking.
I'm just wondering, is it part of the theory that it's important that your type of intelligence is related to your job?
No. These are just examples to indicate what kind of skills are involved with these, or what kind of professions are involved in this kind of intelligence. Where would chef go? Good point. Naturalistic? Now there's a new wave of chefs who use biology, who use science, physics to cook. So you're eating, the egg might suddenly fly up, or I don't know, something bursts into flames, and then I don't know. But they are also scientists. They are highly intelligent in the different theories of science, and they apply it to cooking, to food. So that we have a tricky one there. Anything else? I don't know. Ability to teach. What does that cover? I guess professors have to be interpersonal to a certain extent. You have to be able to communicate with students, or actually see when students are very bored. Other than that, depending on your subject, that would somehow transfer to how you're able to teach. I don't know how professors in other areas teach, like physics or maths or the humanities, compared with psychology. Psychology is a bit more unique because psychology sometimes is a social science, sometimes it's science. So we are in the middle of nowhere. Anything else? Yes?
Maybe some kind of economic intelligence, let's say for people from third world countries who are not educated, who live or survive from farming or something, but they have to somehow manage, maybe they have a lot of kids, they just have a small piece of land, but they somehow have to learn how to do the agriculture and then how to...
That would be mathematical, right? Logical mathematical.
Oh, okay.
They're very good with numbers. You'll be surprised. Farmers. Some farmers are so rich because they know how to invest. They know what to do with their money. They know how to track their money. Anything else that's not in there? Anything wrong with this theory? Yeah.
I think individual can never be in a single category.
Okay. So the problem is, it's very hard to fit one person into one form of intelligence, which is fine, because these are 8 kinds of intelligence and not necessarily exclusive. So I might say that I have 3 types of intelligence, or 4 types of intelligence, or 5 types of intelligence. One might be stronger than the other, for example. Okay? Any other thoughts? Okay. How about application to formal education? Well, Gardner and Sternberg decided to collaborate on this Project Zero. This was a Harvard-based project that's called Practical Intelligence for School Program. Because their idea is that you have to customize education for children, for them to really fulfill their potential, to show their potential, to be intelligent, so to speak. And this program, which I will describe in a bit, did have positive effects on motivation. When you tailor-make, when you customize an educational program to children, then they are much more motivated because you're teaching them what they are interested in, what they are able to do, not just what they're interested in. It also had positive effects on achievement and behavior. So what students had to do, they had to work through lessons that developed their understanding of their own strengths and interests. So they first gave them everything to cover and focus on what they're interested in, what they're good at. And the purpose, they also taught them the purposes of various school tasks. Because many children hate a particular subject because they don't understand why it's important, or they don't understand what they gain from it. They don't understand why they benefit from it. So the idea was to tell students, to actually educate them on why they are doing certain things at school. Why is their homework, and how is it similar to what adults do? Okay, to make it more meaningful to them and more beneficial to them. They also learn the demands of different subject areas. They learn different subjects and they are taught how to cope with the different subjects. Okay, why is it studying for a mathematics test is different from studying social studies or sociology or other kinds of subjects? And the students are also trained in the many steps involved in the school tasks. Okay, so they're not just given homework, they're taught how to do the homework. You need to plan. What do you need? You need a book. You need to go and get the book. How should you get information from this book? Do you just read the whole book? No. So there are the different strategies for completing the school tasks. And finally, the importance of self-monitoring through reflection. So they have journal clubs, they have discussions to help students understand, well, am I progressing, or how am I doing in this, or what should I be doing next? So the idea is through this kind of program where you tailor-made and you really help students understand what they're good at and what they're not good at, then you are able to improve their motivation and their achievement. The question is, how would you measure it? Let's say we need to know how certain kids are, how intelligent certain people are, certain kids are. How would you measure it? I was going to make you come up with one single test to measure a group of people's intelligence. How would you do it? It could be written, it could be visual, it could be verbal, it could be anything. I had one group last semester who suggested putting people in a jungle without anything to see how they would survive. So please don't come up with any more survival tests, okay? Something related to any of the skills required to be intelligent, okay? So start your discussion quickly. Group at the back, here. Whichever group you are.
Okay, yes. We talked about one test with where you see people, we can test how people, the creativity and problem solving by presenting different small parts and say, like build an engine of it, or how to solve a problem with actual things, not mathematical problems. Like so something is broken and you said how to make this work, mechanical things.
Okay, fixing something mechanical that would test which part?
Both creativity and also problem solving and the post-batch.
Are you going to give them resources?
Yes.
Rather than just giving them the broken part and then nothing else? Okay. And are you going to test how fast they do it?
Yes.
Okay. Other ideas? This group?
I always kind of like just combines like problem solving and flexibility in some way. For example, you have 20 sticks. You have to build a bridge over a cross. So then you have multiple rounds. In the first round, so you have 20 sticks, and afterwards you're 18. So you have to find a different way to solve the problem.
Using 20 sticks to build a bridge across two things, and then you get less and less sticks.
Or you get different.
But you know very well it's possible, even though.
Or you get different parts. For example, instead of now you have sticks, then you have less sticks, and you have a rope or something like that. So
I see. Okay.
Adapt.
Okay, so problem solving and flexibility. Well, all of you have heard of IQ. We know what IQ is, and it's the index for intelligence testing. The intelligence quotient is an index, is a measure of a way a person performs on a standardized intelligence test relative to the way others of the same age perform. So in different countries, they have different IQ score norms. So what is the average of the population, and are you above or below? Okay, because you can't generalize the IQ norm in one country to another. Simply because, as I will touch on later, different cultures have different needs in terms of what do they need their population to be intelligent on. Okay, different countries have different focuses or different cultures. Some cultures are more agricultural, some cultures are not. Okay. Now, why do we need to measure intelligence? Flanagan and Harrison proposed that, the three major reasons. One, to predict academic performance. How many of you had to do an IQ test before? And was it for a purpose? For a company, okay? How about that's predict performance on the job? How about academic performance? How many of you did an IQ test for school entrance or university entrance? You did? Okay. Yeah? Okay. Do you think that was a good measure of whether or not you will do well in school? Do you think IQ tests can tell whether you do well in school or not? Why?
Because in the IQ test, there are always so many questions. And when I was doing it, I fell asleep.
Okay, so there might be too many questions for you to handle, but doesn't mean that because you have more time in university, you have more room to improve your potential, to improve your performance. Because you're saying that IQ test is not a good measure of how well you do in school or in university. Well, what is that? How should universities test you to determine whether you're good enough for that university?
I think for my Costa Rican university back home, they actually for the entrance test they do some logic and some linguistics for the test. Like you actually have to apply what you learned in high school, but it's more like about logic and problem solving.
Logic, problem solving.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Now the problem with IQ test questions is, well, are they accurate and are they culturally sensitive? Why should you answer a question in an IQ test that doesn't apply to your culture? Okay, or doesn't apply to what your culture needs or what the typical occupation, typical profession is in your culture. And I'm just going to quickly go through this. I'm not actually describing them, just for you to know what these are. So you don't actually need to know the full details of these tests for your exam. You just need to know the names. Because I might ask you which one of the following is not an intelligence test for babies. So you need to be able to tell which is not. Okay? So Bailey scales Fagan tests are common ones used with infants, and they usually don't really measure the intelligence that we know. They measure any abnormal development, whether this child is likely to develop abnormally later on. So not being able to do certain cognitive tasks. Older children would be the Stanford Binet and the Wechsler scale. And adults, sorry, this is not the one. I lost my adults one. So let's just skip this. Now, what influences intelligence? There are individual differences in intelligence. Why is it some of us are so-called more intelligent than others, depending on which test we're being tested with? But there is some genetic contribution to intelligence. And the proportion of variance in intelligence in a given population is attributable to genetic factors. So you have to be very careful not to generalize IQ scores from one population to another. The estimates of IQ intelligence heritability ratios are around 40% to 70% across the world. So as little as 40% of our intelligence is due to genes. In some populations, 70% of intelligence in that population is due to genes. And the differences in how heritable intelligence is. Why is it in some populations or cultures is more genetic based than others? It depends on the culture and socioeconomic background. The culture or socioeconomic background can either facilitate the expression of intelligence genes or impede them. Okay, I'll give you an example later on. So in terms of culture intelligence, well, cultures may differ on the conceptions of what intelligence is. As I said, in some cultures, it doesn't matter if you're good in art, because in that culture, all you need to be good at is farming. Okay, so to be intelligent in that culture is not to be good at art or not to be good at music. But in some cultures where music and art are very, very important parts of that culture, then when you're good at art and when you're good at music, people might label you as, oh, you're so intelligent, you're really smart. Okay, because you are good at what is important, what is significant to that culture. Different cultures also use different methods of problem solving. Some cultures simply don't use any computers, don't use any form of technology. Okay, their problem solving skills are quite different from other cultures. And again, cultures differ in the skills they need and value, as I mentioned before. Now, a lot of researchers are very interested in what poverty does to intelligence. When children are raised in a very deprived environment, poor families, what does that do to their intelligence, and how and why? Children who live in poverty in their preschool years, okay, coming back to think about critical periods, seem to be more at risk than children who are not exposed to such levels of poverty until middle or late childhood. So if you lived in a very poor environment in preschool age, okay, so before 6 or before 7, it's much worse for the child than if the child was okay in preschool age but becomes poor in middle childhood or late childhood. Okay? And genetic factors are also more significant in high socioeconomic status families than in low socioeconomic status families. The reason being, when children are raised in deprived environments, the environment itself cut off their genetic potential. Okay, so the environment has more of an impact on their intelligence than on genes for low SES families, low SES children. Of course, there are other factors like pregnancy and birth, family, parents and siblings, how they interact with the child, how they reinforce the child. School and peer groups. Okay, parents are obsessed with sending their kids to the best schools. Some children benefit a great deal from the best schools. Some are just intelligent in any school they go to. The community, social class, again, culture, like I mentioned before. Now, a lot of people, when they talk about intelligence, they talk about the Flynn effect. Okay, because it appears that IQ scores in different populations seem to be rising at the rate of approximately 3 points per decade. And the question is, are we getting more intelligent? If we are, why? Any thoughts? Why might we become more intelligent? Why might we evolve to be more intelligent with each decade? Any ideas? Yeah.
Exposed to different technologies.
Technology, exposure to different technology, and the fact that technology is allowing you to access information much more easily, much quicker. Okay, you no longer have to deliberately go to the library to search for information. You can just use your cell phone. Well, depending on what information you look up, not Facebook information. Any other reasons? Why might we, the human species, become more intelligent with each decade, with time, or appear to be? Improvement in nutrition and health care. We are more careful about our health. We are more careful about, well, what should we eat to make our brains better? You know, all the hype about the high DHA stuff, or superfoods that make you think faster, make you do things faster, make you pay attention more, improve your memory, etc., etc. Taking supplements, okay, to improve that. Or just simply taking better care of yourselves that help you function better than previously. Interaction among cultures, globalization. We share information with each other. What is different will teach us something more. What is similar will also teach us something more. So sharing intelligence will obviously improve intelligence among the different populations. And genetics seem to be less significant when you consider why is it we're becoming more intelligent. Well, okay, you could say that we're getting more intelligent genes, but evolution does take much longer. So we need to understand why else. What else is contributing to this so-called rise in IQ scores, so IQ points. And finally, to wrap up, this is another of my favorite quotes. Susan Sontag says, intelligence is really a kind of taste, a taste in ideas. We are intelligent in what we are interested in. Okay, what means to us, what interests us, what is our taste, would make us intelligent. Okay? All right.